Hello and welcome to episode one of our World Show. So my name is Scott Windows Monkey, and I'm here with our guest for today, which is the Direwolves coach Sharp. So thanks for coming on today, Sharp.
That's all right. I'm glad to be here.
All right. So just before I do begin the show, the first thing which I'm going to mention is that we have a Steam competition on our Twitter. So if you head on over to our Twitter, you should see a post where you can just retweet and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can be in to win a $20 Steam card. In terms of the show today, we're going to do it in a couple of sections. So the first section, which we're going to do, is going to be on the group stage. So we're just going to go over each of the different groups, talk about some of the things which happened, some of the narratives which occurred, um, and yeah, just kind of analyze what occurred. And then we're going to do a section on the quarterfinals. So we're going to get some predictions, kind of go over the matchups, I guess, stylistically, why they should go the way that we predict them. And finally, um, we're just going to go over and have a couple of questions for Sharp about DW's experience at Worlds and the play-in. Um, so yeah, I guess without anything else, we can get straight into it. So the first group is Group A. So that was um, the one with SKT, C9, Edward Gaming, and AHQ. Now, I guess the first thing which I want to ask you about here, Sharp, is SKT. So SKT goes 5-1 in this group. You know, a good record, right? Finishing in the group first. But looking very, very flawed in the group stages. Falling down against EDG. How are they consistently managing to win the games when falling so far behind? I guess is this like a bad thing? Looking quite bad for SKT going into the quarters, or
Well, like personally, if anything, I think that this shows the strength of SKT. A lot of people may think, oh, okay, or cracks in the armor in terms of SKT, but from a coach's perspective, if they are maintaining their cool, they're playing to the win conditions, figuring out like creative ways to make these massive comebacks. If anything, I think this is extremely impressive. And this is actually scary for any team coming up against SKT, knowing that no matter how big the advantage you're going to get, it's going to be extremely hard to close out games. So I think that SKT, it may seem like a weakness, like in terms of making some mistakes in the early game, but yeah, by no means, I think we should be worrying about SKT.
right? Okay. I mean, I believe that this is something which has come up in previous seasons. We're going into the quarters. I think last year against Rocks Tigers, where everybody's saying, "Oh, Rocks Tigers is going to win the championship," and then SKT, kind of still won it. So I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. And I guess one of those teams which I mentioned, which I guess did quite well against SKT, well, despite losing both of the games, was EDG. So EDG going 0-3 in week one, and then I think 2-1 in week two, right? What was
Mm,
the difference
yeah.
between EDG in week one and week two for you?
Um, it's hard to say. Like, I think that iBoy stepped it up in the second half. I think iBoy had a really good performance in the second. There's two wins against C9 and AHQ. But other than that, I think they possibly, like, looking at their compositions, didn't differ too much. Like, they still had the priority on the Ardent. But yeah, in terms of maybe I think they had a better read on C9 because C9 um, stylistically are a very difficult team to play against. You have to come in extremely well prepared. So I think they definitely had they're well prepared for C9. Um, but yeah, I'm actually not sure. I think a lot of it comes off the back of iBoy, to be honest, because I think he's a bit of a child prodigy.
Oh, really? Right.
Yeah, like he's really young. I think I'm pretty sure he's 17. Like he's very young.
Damn. I honestly didn't. I mean, that kind of reminds you of like Uzi, right? Back in season two, three, right? Where
Yeah,
was he like very young back then? Um,
yeah. So let's
right.
actually look at the comps. Wait, looking at the comps. Do you have? Well, let's even get the comps up versus. So we got the C9 versus EDG. Um, so the one where C9 won. We had that was the game where Scout was on Lucian. And they gave Lulu, and personally I think that Lulu is like mega high priority. I think Lulu even more so than something like Jana, and they got Rakan for it. Like I'm not entirely convinced on that. And that was actually the game that C9 pulled out the Graves. So I think that was a massive. They actually played really well around that Graves. And the second time around, uh, what's it called? Edward Gaming had the Lulu this time. So that could have been the main thing. Um, yeah, I think that was the main thing, and as well as I think Deficio made a good point. I think on Twitter I recently saw was that they needed to be playing around bot side, and then Scout ended up playing Galio in the second time, and that really worked out well to play around iBoy because Galio is one of those champions like in conjunction with Caitlyn. Um, it's just so obnoxious because you really want to punish the Caitlyn, or like you really want to be able to force ganks onto the Caitlyn. If you got the Galio there just looming over, it's extremely hard to like stop that lane dominance. And it looked like this iBoy just snowballed out of laning phase.
Right. I mean, you mentioned the power of Lulu and Janna in the tournament. You know, maybe saying Lulu's a bit more powerful than Janna. But playing around bottom lane is, or your AD carry is the way to play this Worlds, right? So the teams with the stronger AD carries doing well. So is I guess, do you think allowing iBoy to play aggressively, have that Lulu support? Do you think I guess that's so you say that's the primary reason that they won or they were able to win in the second week?
I think the main thing is that the fact that they start to play around bot side and play around iBoy. And I think that instead of picking something like Lucian, they started to play Galio, and then that kind of opened up bot lane and their ability to push their advantage through laning phase, and as well like putting the higher priority on Lulu instead of giving Lulu for Rakan. I think that's a big thing.
Right. Okay. I just had one question for you. You said stylistically Cloud9 is quite difficult to play against. What I guess what's the reason? Is it like I guess the hard pressure that they put down on your mid laner, or what makes them so hard to play against?
Well, so C9, if you think about most teams, I think Direwolves is probably the biggest example. Direwolves, stylistically, we tend not to play 5v5 team fights, or which we prefer to play 4-1 comps or like a split push orientated comp. And C9, for example, Impact can play the strong split pushing champions. He's mechanically good enough and skilled enough to be able to push his limits on something like I don't know, even like a Jace or a Kennen or a Gnar or whatever. But he can also play tanks like extremely well. And same as Contracts. Contracts can play that supportive jungle tanky style like Sejuani, Gragas. But he can also play the Kayn, Ezreal, Graves, right? He can also play Kayn. So and Jensen, like he can also play like something like an Echo, but he can also default to something like Ori. So all round, C9 is extremely well rounded. Like they can play any style of composition, and they adapt well to the meta, and they all put pressure on you in draft for tunneling too hard on particular bands. And I just feel as though they're a very difficult team to draft against and actually create a plan to verse because they're so multifaceted. I think
Right.
that's a massive thing that everyone underestimates about C9.
Right. Okay. So I mean, you seem to be, I guess, talking quite positively about C9. This team coming out. I think second place in the group, right? Um. So I guess C9 consistently managing to make it out of groups at Worlds is, I guess, the only NA team, right? Um, I guess what's different about uh, C9 then? Like, why are they constantly able to do that? Um,
Um, Well, I think one thing that C9, like a massive strength that they have for them is obviously that you got that veteran in the top lane, you got Impact who obviously has that world experience. So I think personally that C9, or this year anyway, and because Impact played last year for C9, yeah,
yeah. Yep.
yeah, and World. So I think that Impact has a lot more. He has a lot more of a say and input on how the team operates than meets the eye. Like I think a lot of people may think he's just like the Korean import who is like a rock in the top lane, but I'm actually under the assumption that he has a very very deep game understanding, and he's brought a lot of things from SKT into C9, and I think that he's been the difference between C9 being that you know um, the status quo of like NA, just failing it at Worlds. But I think he's what kind of differentiates him. I think he's a very, very strong player, not just in his role, but what he brings to the team.
Right. Yeah. I mean, definitely that experience at SKT would be be pretty crucial. I mean, between like him and Reaper, it must bring Tom to that team. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a pretty fair point. Um, I guess in terms of the next group then, kind of moving on to Group B. So this was the one with Longzhu, um, Fnatic, Gigabyte Marines, and Immortals. Now, see, this is definitely my favorite group. Partly because like Gigabyte Marines are just they're just so fun to watch, right? Um,
Mm.
and then partly because like there was so many games played, like that last night where Fnatic just wins everything
Yeah.
and manages to make it. It's pretty incredible. I guess another same question, but this time I guess a lot better for Fnatic because they actually managed to pull the wins out to get themselves out of group. Difference between Fnatic in week 1 and 2.
Yeah. So you want like the differences between week 1 and 2?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um. All right. So I think Fnatic, they definitely. I would say they're a team that it didn't surprise me that they went 0-3 in the first week. Because, or firstly, because I think very highly of Gigabyte Marines. I'm actually friends with their coach. And he was telling me he had some stuff in store. And I think just playing versus them, and Fnatic, we versus Fnatic in Scrim, but I think Gigabyte Marines are, I just think they're really suited to these type of tournaments, like the best of one type games. I just feel like they excel. So it didn't surprise me that Fnatic had that first loss against Gigabyte Marines, and everyone was like, "What the hell?" As if Gigabyte Marines being Fnatic, but honestly, it didn't surprise me. I think Fnatic are a team that they really do play standard in the sense that, like, I go against like how Soaz has been regarded as like a veteran. I feel like he's just a downgraded version of Impact in the sense that he can't play carries or tanks as well as Impact, and I feel like Soaz kind of limits them in terms of how well they can do on the international stage, since top lane is such an important role. But in terms of the differences between week 1 and week 2, let's have a look at their comps. So if you actually look at their first game against, so their first loss against the Mortals and compared to their first win, so we got
I mean, the first loss against the Immortals, that was the one where Reckless, it was kind of at that late game point with the hypercarry, right? And he went for that assassination and managed to lose them the game. Um,
oh yeah,
yeah,
that the one, yeah, so that was that loss. And Soaz went 1-6. I think actually one thing I have to compliment on that game, Immortals played really well around Jace. I think Flame played extremely well in Jace that game. Jace, like, that kind of leads me to a point where, like, maybe we can get to this later on, but Jace is a pick. We can talk maybe this in terms of the TSM draft, but Jace is a pick that requires like a full like game plan around and pick multiple picks that complement it, not just a pick in its own for the lane. And I feel like Talia is one of those, and Immortals picking up Talia along with the Jace really does. It complements Jace's lane pressure and allows him to snowball his advantage and utilize his heavy trading. And I feel like a lot of teams are kind of missing that part when they pick Jace. They're not picking mid laners that can affect the side lanes, and then it leaves Jason a one-on-one. And then if he can't push his advantage through like if he doesn't feel pressured from Jace is a champion that needs to be protected and like put on an island, and you can't let the enemy jungler put pressure on the Jace. Otherwise, it gets to a point where the tank can just like get like Bramble Vest and a certain amount of armor, and Jace won't be able to push his advantage large enough. And I feel like Immortals did this really well against Fnatic, and I think that was the main reason, despite Reckless popping off. I think that was the main reason as to why Immortals were able to get that win. Um, in terms of the second game, Fnatic. Oh yeah, so this was the game. Oh yeah, this was a pretty close game
wait,
actually.
was this the
This is the second one
this is
where,
this is the one with the insec, right? Tristana insec.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That was actually a pretty close game. So I honestly think stylistically these two teams are very close. Like they're both very well rounded. They tend not to play too much split push. They tend to play team fight. So, um, One thing that did surprise me though is the fact that Smithy had high priority on Ezreal. Like I didn't think he was that sort of jungler to play like the carry orientated junglers. I thought he was going to be someone who's going to default to more of the tank like Sejuani and maybe even like Jarvan and stuff like that. But he played a lot of Ezreal this competition, and that really surprised me. And I think that was probably one of the downfalls of Immortals, to be honest, because Fnatic end up just picking Rek'Sai, um, not falling too far behind early and just outscaling really, really hard. I think that was one of the main reasons why Fnatic were able to turn around, especially against Immortals.
Right. Well, I want to kind of bring you back to the point about the Jace. 'Cause I think this is also a pretty good group to discuss Jason, right? You know, you got
Yeah,
on the one hand you've got like Immortals, and then on the other hand you've got Khan, right? So
yeah.
actually, that's a really good question. You said it's about how the team plays around Jace. So there's like the whole meme with like Khan's Jace being the only good Jace. So do you think that Longzhu is just really good at playing around Jace, or do you think Khan is just an incredible Jace player, or is it kind of a bit of both?
It's a bit of both, right? So if you actually look at the games where Longzhu get Jace, yeah, nearly every single time, nearly every single time, what's it called? They have a team that complements they have a team that complements the Jace. So just looking at the one game, because I think they only got Jace. Yeah, they only got Jace once. They only got Jace once in this competition. Oh, so far. So we got. I'm pretty sure it was against Fnatic. Was it against Fnatic they got Jace? Let me find it. Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So the way they play Jace. So there's two things you need to consider when picking Jace. So Jace wins the 1v1, but doesn't win. Usually struggles in 2v2. Like in the jungle, like jungle top, they usually lose 2v2 because tanks kind of like tankier champions kind of complement the junglers really well. So and there's a lot of gank setup. So Jace can get caught out really early because I mean really easily because he doesn't have much mobility. So the way Longzhu play Jace is that Cuz will generally like invade heavy and track the enemy jungler and put pressure on the enemy jungler to force them to like trade sides or force the enemy jungler to show on a particular side of the map and just put pressure and keep track of Rek'Sai. So what that does, or the enemy jungler. So what that does, when Cuz does that, Khan is just like freely harassing 1v1 and wins pretty much any matchup 1v1. And then how they complement this is they generally play champions that can impact the side lane as well. So they generally play champions like Talia or Ryze, generally with something like a Jace, in which that champion can can and has the ability to roam and utilize the pressure and the dive pressure that Jace has on the enemy laner. I think Longzhu play around this really well, but although on a side note, it is really important that you have to play Jace like perfectly to be able to play on the world stage. You can't afford to mess up mechanically. Khan is easily probably the best top player in the competition, and he's definitely the best Jace in the world. So I think like obviously it makes it a lot easier for them to use these compositions, but I'm under the assumption that not many teams other than Longzhu actually know how to utilize and actually play around a Jace composition because it's something that you have to come in knowing exactly what to draft with it and against it and play around it. I think that if you remember the SKT versus Longzhu, how they got that win with the Jace against the Cho'Gath, and you actually see how they deep invaded level 1 and forced the enemy jungler to like do a funny path, and the jungler was like got there really late and couldn't prevent the dive, and they played Talia with it as well, which allowed the early, you can shove early and then roam. So again, like Longzhu, they consistently do the same thing: roam heavy mid laner, and the jungler puts pressure on the enemy jungler by heavy invading and utilizing the lane pressure that Jace has. And this kind of leads to like the TSM type thing where they kind of left Jace on an island and they didn't play around the Jace and didn't heavy invade. And as soon as you leave Jace on an island like that where is not safe from roams or jungle pressure, one death and you're like useless. So I think TSM just weren't able to pull that off.
Yeah, I mean, especially like Longzhu can kind of get away with team fighting with the Jace, just because of I guess how strong they are at team fighting as how good they are as a team, I guess. But I mean, Jace, when I guess not that team is playing it and it gets to the late game, it seems to really struggle. So yeah, I can definitely see that point. All right. So I have one more question for you. So you mentioned before about Gam being really really good in this best of one setup. Um, I guess did Gam just I guess cheese their wins out, or do you think they had like a very genuine chance to I guess do well out of groups? You know, if let's say that last game went to Gigabyte Marines and not Fnatic, um, the tiebreakers, and Gigabyte Marines gets out of groups. Which team do you think I guess does better outside of the group stage?
Or outside of the group stage, I think Gigabyte Marines would struggle. But in saying that, I still stand by my point that Gigabyte Marines are better in the group stages, in the best of one format. I think Gigabyte Marines are extremely underrated in the sense that they come up with strategy that is actually well thought out. So, for example, you know how they did like the level one swaps? What it does is like, if you remember, I think it was like, I don't know how many seasons ago, like 2 seasons ago, 1 or 2 seasons ago, where it was just a lane swap.
Yeah.
Like level one lane swaps, like it's a whole thing that you need to do to be able to ward for, jungle path for. There's a bunch of things that you need to do to be able to counter the level one lane swap, and by doing it in like game one or like a few of these games, like early on in the competition, not many teams know how to deal with it, and they're not experienced in versing it, and it's actually extremely smart because they're putting the enemy team on edge straight away, and they're making them think and putting them in uncomfortable position. And even though if the enemy team, unless they know how to play against it proficiently, they're always going to get an advantage. And they just seem to do this consistently. And I think that's something that I respect about Gigabyte Marines, that they're willing to pull out these strategies that teams weren't familiar with. And even though you can say they're subpar or off meta, they still seem to work because of the surprise factor. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
so
players haven't had to deal with that for so long. I mean, I think during the regular split of 2016 was the last time of summer 2016. That was the last time that you saw lane swaps. So I mean, yeah, you're right. None of the players. I mean, uh, none of the teams will have been scrimming against that, right? Not until I guess Gam started doing
yeah,
it. So yeah, I can.
exactly. I think Longzhu did really well against it though. They knew exactly how to counter the lane swap. They did really well in countering that lane swap. They got like the level one wards, and then they punished them for they punished the Archie for like sitting under the tower and being really low level, and they just four-man dived early, which is what you're meant to do. You just ward behind TP, four-man dive, and like Longzhu did really well. But other teams kind of struggled. But I do think that Gigabyte Reigns, I wouldn't say they cheese their wins. I genuinely think that they're a good team, and they came in with a plan and they executed on that plan. I was surprised that they kind of towards the end they started playing standard. Like they played a really standard comp in their last game versus Fnatic. I think they played like Maokai. They played like Maokai, Sejuani, Oriana. They played like a really standard team fight comp, and I was a bit disappointed to be honest because I thought that Gigabyte Marines would kind of go out with a bang, and whether or not they won or lost, I thought they would have just tried something crazy, like maybe continue to play an aggressive jungler, um, and just make the game chaotic because they seem to thrive in chaos. But yeah,
Right. Yeah, I mean, the chaos definitely did go well for them, because I think it was the two games which they won was the one with the Nocturne, like that level 5 ultimate. I mean, that even scared me, and I was just watching it. It just came out so early. And the caster just goes insane. And then the second one was the one where they had it was the Urgot, yeah, against Immortals.
yeah, the Urgot as well.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, does definitely seems, I guess, based on the evidence that you're right, that if they'd, I guess, tried to go for some less standard play, perhaps could have. And I guess the allocation of resources is another point which I'd like to bring up with Gigabyte Marines. Like, just doing the double jungle with Archie and getting all of the gold and all of the XP
Mm.
onto Levi. They're players that are, I guess, not the best. Like Archie, obviously, potentially the weakest top laner in the whole tournament, right? Um, but they recognize that, and they just put all of their resources, into Optimus, into Levi, the players which are gonna and no way, players which are gonna carry the game for them.
I think like one thing to note is like Archie, like it's really hard to say like who the weakest top laner is because I'm a massive believer in a player that someone like Archie. I know for a fact that he's the one like who comes up with all this strategy. Like they even said in one of the interviews, I think Levi said that they asked who comes up with all this strategy, and it's like Levi. It's Archie. like Archie would bring so much help into that team, like in regards to macro and in regards to leadership. Probably that even someone better individually would probably it probably wouldn't change anything. Like they would actually decrease their chances of winning because Archie probably brings something that makes them unique. And although yeah, he might be like the worst mechanical top laner at the competition, like I would probably say that he could be better for that team than any of the other top laners that they could bring in. Probably excluding someone like Khan or Huni, but yeah, like I think in his own right, he's probably a world class top laner.
Right. Okay. So I guess we'll cast him what he brings to the team rather than his uh his own play.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, I suppose like the team dynamic is very important, and I guess it does seem to be working out with them. Like, I mean, Levi is such a good individual player. And if he's having like strategy designed around him,
yeah.
um, yeah.
I think it's smart playing to their strengths. I think that's something that a lot of teams, or especially the weaker teams in the competition, have to be doing more of. You play to your strengths. You don't try and like you try. Obviously, you try and cover your like fix your weaknesses, but you should in a competition like Worlds. There's no time to fix your weaknesses. You should be double downing on what you're strong at, double downing on your strengths rather than trying to cover up your weaknesses.
Yeah, and I mean, Gigabyte Marines had the best the best game against Longzhu, right? That second game. Oh, I thought they were gonna win it.
Oh yeah,
It was
I was so sad. I wanted them to win so badly.
yeah. It was
Oh,
oh
they were
it's-
heartbroken.
yeah. It was very it's very depressing. But I mean, they yeah, like you mentioned, they play towards their strengths, and I guess doubling the power of Levi through the picks, like
Yeah,
the Zillion and the where he's playing the Rengar, and they were just playing really heavily around it, and it's like I guess doubling down on that strength, they managed to almost take that game from Longzhu, whereas I guess the teams which just Fnatic, Immortals, they just tried to do the normal thing, lane against Longzhu, and then group up for fights. It just didn't, yeah, it just
yeah,
didn't
and
didn't
that's
pan
like
out.
one point. It leads me to one point that I've heard a few times is that I think the Gigabyte Marines coach said to me, he said, "You're not gonna beat the Koreans at their own game. Like you're not gonna beat a team like Longzhu by playing like Longzhu or playing their comps. So you're not gonna beat them like that. You have to pull out something that is unique and something that you've been practicing and something that playing your own game. I think that's like something that you really, really got to push if you're a team like Gigabyte Marines or even Fnatic or Immortals, to be honest.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, I guess we can move on to group number C now. Group number C. Group letter C. Um, so this was the one with Royal Never Give Up, Samsung, G2, and 1907 Fenerbahce. I don't know if I've butchered that. Maybe I'm gonna get some hate. But so I guess this group, the real story is RNG, right? Coming into the tournament,
Yeah.
everybody's saying, the Koreans, they're gonna win everything. To be honest, the other groups almost seemed kind of boring with the Koreans, right? Like the big story with Group B, you know, who's gonna make it out in C2? Nobody really gave a shit about Longzhu because everybody just kind of knew they were gonna go 6-0. SKT, a little bit more exciting because they fell behind, but still 5-1, pretty clear winners. This one though, RNG managing to take down the Koreans. So how far through this tournament do you think RNG can make it after beating this Korean team? If they theoretically go up against SKT or Longzhu in the future, could they win?
Wait, so they're versing in the quarters. They're versing Fnatic. Okay, so I think we'll get to that later, but I think RNG could potentially make it to the finals. I think I think they're a really strong team. I think that just showed through their dominant performances against Samsung. Like they had a 27-minute against both their wins against Samsung. One was a 32-minute, one was a 27-minute. Like they're both pretty. That's like they're stomps. Like 20, like a sub 30-minute game at Worlds is like a stomp. They actually perfect gamed them, I think. Oh no, they didn't. They lost two towers, but they didn't have any deaths in one of their games against Samsung, and they won in 27 minutes. And the other game, they won in 32 minutes, which is extremely good as well. Um, I think the RNG are a fantastic team. I think that all round they don't really have many weaknesses. Like MLXG can play, Tank he can play, more that bruiser type aggressive jungler. Let me can play tanks. He can play the Galio or the Maokai, but he can also play something like the Rumble. Xiaohu as well can play like something like he can play this Galio like the tanky bot side or side lane style, or he can play something like a Syndra, in which he did against Crown. So and Uzi obviously, and he's a prodigy. So I think all round across their roster, they're just insanely good. I don't think that I think they can definitely make it to finals and potentially take out one of the other Korean teams that they verse in the semis.
Right. I mean, you mentioned Uzi, and how I guess powerful he is as an ADC at the moment. I guess in terms of that RNG having a good chance against the Koreans, how important do you think the meta is, being based so heavily around ADC and Uzi, for that to I guess be the case?
Yeah, I think that. So I think this is actually a massive like it's actually huge for the Chinese team, or especially RNG, because Koreans, they're renowned for their top laners. Like obviously, Korean top laners always been the best, like no matter what. And I think that being this bot centric meta really really helps RNG, because they've been known to kind of dominate through bot lane, and their 2v2 bot is just extremely strong. And I think that because the meta has shifted away from like the top bruisers, it's more towards the bot Ardent Sensor meta. And champions like Caitlyn, you'll see come up, Cogmore, and Uzi just thrives. And I think that if the meta was the other way around, if it was a top centric meta, and Uzi was playing stuff like, maybe like Ashe, or, Jhin, more like utility, I guess, I feel like RNG would have struggled a lot more. I feel like that's where Korean teams probably would have, like Samsung probably would have done better against RNG. But I think Royal Never Give Up are extremely fortunate about how the metas panned out.
Right. You mentioned, RNG possibly making it to the finals, which means they need to take down SKT or Longzhu. I'm not actually sure which side of the quarters they're on. Are they on the SKT? I think they're on the SKT side, right?
I'm not 100%
Yeah,
sure.
they're on the SKT side, so potentially making it to finals, which means they'd have to take down SKT or Misfits. um,
Yeah.
so is this the only non-Korean team which could take down one of the other Korean teams, or do you think that there's another team in the quarters which has a chance?
To be honest, I don't see any other team. Nah, I don't see any other team. I don't see World Elite taking out. I still stand by RNG being the only team. I think that RNG is significantly stronger than World Elite. So, in terms of just overall, like the styles that they can play, and like their strengths across the board, are a lot cleaner. So, I think the RNG, yeah, definitely are the only team out of China who can beat a Korean team.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'd have to agree with that. RNG, I guess, doing really well in what my opinion was a much stronger group than WE. Um, they had a much tougher time to get out. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Um, I guess the final thing is G2. So G2 finishing third in this group. So in spite of their third place finish, a lot of people seem to be praising them, like on Reddit, and a lot of the casters saying, G2 week two looking really really good. Um, I guess do you think that they deserve to place in the knockout stage over Samsung or RNG or
Well, they lost both their games to Samsung. They didn't beat Samsung either of the games. Like both their wins were versus the Fenerbahce team, and they got one win off RNG. Um, to be honest, like they did play well. Like they did have a really solid win against RNG. It was another 27-minute game, and only had two deaths between on their team. Um, and looking across the compositions, they did have both teams had a strong composition. It wasn't like RNG messed up in the draft phase. So like I definitely think that G2 have strengths. They are a good team, but I still stand by my point that they will just get outclassed by Korean teams. Like overall, I think that expect makes their team, like they obviously got the Korean top laner there that kind of um, fills that criteria. Having a Korean top laner means you're a pretty decent team, but um, I think that Sven and Mithy, yeah, would have just got outclassed as the competition goes on in terms of bot lane 2v2. I think Perks is decent though. He held up his own against any of the other mid laners. So I think where it kind of lacked was Trick in the bot lane personally, but I really think they would get outclassed by teams such as Longzhu or SKT.
Right, okay. And I suppose one thing which I perhaps should ask is maybe just a little bit about 1907 Fenerbahce. Wildcard team, oh, they're not a thing anymore, but play-in team. Um, '06, I guess they were in a really, really tough group. Would this team have gone '06 in every group, or?
Um, I don't think they would have went 06 in for like I would have liked to seen Gigabyte Marines versus Fenerbahce, or even like Fenerbahce versus like Immortals or Fnatic. I think Fenerbahce are a decent team. I really do think they're a decent team. I think they could have taken games of Fnatic or Immortals. Um, so I think they did have a very tough group. Samsung, G2, yeah, they had an extremely tough group. So that could have potentially been where we would have been if Divals made it through in that group, which would have been hell. But I think that considering the language barrier, like they've got a Korean jungler. I don't really know how that works in terms of comms. They've got two Koreans on the team. I don't really know how good Frozen's English is, but Crash, like I think he's quite a new. I don't think his English is that great. So considering having two Koreans on the team, with the language barrier, I really do think that they've done quite well. So props to them. A lot of people would come in and probably hate on them. They didn't win a game, but you have to remember who they're versing. You know, they're versing the best Chinese team, one of the best Korean teams, and the best EU team. So, um, I think you kind of have to cut them some slack. And I really do think they had some close games there. That what was that one game they nearly beat Samsung. They nearly beat Samsung that one game. So
Yeah,
they do have a really a decent understanding of macro. I think they just struggle to close out games. I think that was kind of evident in their gameplay that they really struggled to once they got to like all the outer towers down and like the tier threes were still up. They didn't know how to crash the waves or like set the waves up in terms of setting up a siege, or they didn't know how to go about breaking those tier threes. And I feel like that's maybe something that they hadn't been in a position before in terms of a team who knew how to hold on or defend from a siege. So getting that lead in the first place really does show that individually they could compete on the world stage, but they just need a little bit of work on closing out games, and they really will be a difficult opponent for us, Direwolves, especially heading into international tournaments against them.
right. Yeah, I mean, no doubt that they do on the play-ins, and yeah, I mean, actually, looking at Group C, I mean, you have RNG. I know that they finished second, G2 finishing first, and then Samsung being third. Obviously, Samsung deserving third in their region, but it's Korea. That is
Mm.
it's a very unlucky group. You see, Direwolves was smart, getting out during the play-ins. Didn't.
I think we versed Fenerbahce in scrims.
All right.
Um, they were yeah, they were pretty decent. Like they didn't seem at the time you can't tell it's scrims, but um, I do think they have a big weakness in their bot lane. Their bot 2v2, like even weren't doing that well against like King and Destiny.
Right.
So like I don't really know how good their bot lane is, but and the other three like Frozen, Crash, and Dolgen all did pretty well. So in that sense, I think that they've definitely got some strengths, formidable strengths.
Yeah, I mean, Frozen ex-LCK player, right? I think he used to be recognized as being a pretty decent player.
Yeah,
So, yeah. All right. Well, I guess we can move on to Group D. Now, the reason that I love Group D is because it has TSM in it again, and TSM didn't make it out again, which means that this has provided like the most entertainment possible on Twitter, and on Reddit.
yeah,
Um, so I guess we can discuss this. I guess we can start off with TSM. TSM, part of that group of three which went 2-1 in week two. Sorry, in week one, and then in week two it just kind of you know didn't didn't really go so well. I think they won one game in week two and lost three, right? Um,
yeah,
yeah. So um, you mentioned before about the Jace. But what goes wrong for TSM in week two? Like,
yeah. Okay, so like looking at their draft against. Oh, okay. So they lost against. You know how they had that really devastating loss against World Elite in week two, I
oh yeah,
believe.
they got smashed.
Yeah, it's like 24-minute game. So in draft, they really like looking at the draft. They had losing bot 2v2, losing mid, losing top. So they dug themselves in a hole from draft in terms of weak laning phases. And I think TSM they like as a team and how they draft. Path really likes to draft compositions that work well as a five rather than valuing. From this is my opinion. Valuing the pressure that a matchup will get in the early stages of the game. So I think maybe TSM are so confident in their ability to play from behind, or they individually that they think that they're good enough to be able to go behind a little bit in laning phase, but then make the unfavorable matchups not as bad as people would think. But I think that on the world stage, you can't afford to have three losing lanes, or like even two losing lanes and a jungler that doesn't can't even really push his advantage either is something that it's very hard because what I've realized is that looking at Worlds, the teams that do have a weaker laning phases, they always have a jungler that or like they always have a matchup that can actually set up ganks. But TSM didn't really have a lane that could like set up ganks. Like if you actually look at their game, they had Jarvan, but their bot lane was Twitch Lulu versus Kate Jana. Like they can never touch that lane. Kate Jana is never gonna die. As long as Sejuani keeps track of Jarvan, like they're never gonna die, and they're always just gonna sit there and bullying. Um, as well as top. So all Sejuani has to do is like sit round top and make sure Rumble doesn't die to a random gank of Jarvan, and then they slowly just push their advantages in the laning phases, and they spike earlier, and they can just run over them. Like Jace Rumble spikes so early, and I think TSM just got too cocky in terms of their drafts, like giving up lane pressure to like giving up their lane pressure to try and play for a composition that scaled, but it just didn't work. And I think what actually happened is as the competition progressed, and this kind of evident in their draft versus Misfits and um, Misfits and what's it called Flash Wolves. They tried to play stronger laners, but it just didn't work out. Like they tried to play the Cassiopeia to be more of a bully lane, and they had the Triss Lulu instead of Twitch, which was like obviously stronger in lane and doesn't get shoved in as hard. And especially against Misfits, it looks like they're like sick of getting stomped in lane, so then they like, all right, we'll just play more like early um, early spiking, so they pick the Jace. And I think like that, like the Jace pick for me seemed a little bit panicky. Like whether I don't blame Path, like I blame like the whole team's decision, and I can completely understand because this is something that when the competitions get really intense, you're as a coach and as a team being in these situations, your mind gets skewed based off of your previous performances. So since they were having a rough few games, they probably jumped to conclusions and said, okay, we're losing too hard and we're not spiking early enough, or we're losing too hard in laning phase, or like we need to spike earlier to be able to combat the mid spiking team compositions. So like, all right, let's pick this Jace to try and get our Kog'Maw through the early game or rise through the early game. And it just did not fit in their comp whatsoever, and they didn't know how to play around it, and they just left it on an island and it's died, and then the game's over. And I really do think it's a shame because I think that TSM are a good team in terms of like macro wise. They definitely know how to play the game, and individually as well. They're all formidable opponents and great players, but I think this is something that's just unexcusable considering their experience on the world stage. I really do think that they needed to have a clear view of how exactly like what separates TSM from other teams, because it felt like to me personally they're just trying to play like every other team. They had nothing that kind of differentiated them to other teams. And it just dug themselves a hole, and then they tried to catch up and evolve with the meta, but they couldn't, and led them to losing.
Do you think the community, I guess, had something to do with that? Because I mean, Path was getting fucking roasted on Twitter, and on Reddit, right? Especially after the WE game, like lots of memes like triple scaling lane. Do you think that might have gone to him? I mean, to be fair, it didn't do him any good to pick the Jace, because then now you've got like the Korean Jace versus NA Jace memes.
Yeah.
But do you think, I guess, all that community criticism kind of got to him?
Um, I do think that TSM kind of like dig themselves a hole. Like like if you actually see their players and how they talk on social media, like it's just like, all right, we're gonna win today. Like that's what they say. Like on social media, I think they're extremely confident in their ability, and I think they set themselves up to like they just put themselves in that they put the pressure on themselves. Like the TSM as a brand, it's just that pressure for them to perform, and they talk so much about them being so dominant, similar to like us like Divals, like we were so confident and you head in and then you lose, and when things start going bad, it's really hard to kind of just be like, oh shit, okay, um we need to like calm down here because you've already got all this pressure looming over you. I
I'm,
think
I'm
TSM.
just thinking of the Chippies Impact thing, right? What was it that Impact said to Chippies in lobby? Uh,
uh
like Chippies was like round two or something, and then Impact was he just like stop? I can't remember it exactly.
Oh
Um,
yeah, something like that.
yeah,
Yeah, the stop please or something.
yeah. Oh man.
Like even in the pre-game lobby, we were on the stage. Like Chippies and Impactor had banter. Pretty funny.
I mean, no offense, but I mean, I think Impact won out in game, right? But
Yeah, you can
um,
say that.
but yeah, no, I definitely understand what you mean. Like you know, somebody put up a photo with the two tweets from Double Lifter. It was like, "We will win." Sorry, guys.
Yeah,
Before and after the game. So yeah, I don't see it. And I mean, to be fair, they are kind of, potentially, other than the Chinese teams, the most popular team in the West, right? So there's a lot of, I guess, expectation on their shoulders. So
yeah.
yeah. All right. In terms of, I guess the other big thing, which for me from this group was Flash Wolves. First seed from the LMS. LMS has done quite well at Worlds. They managed to get themselves an extra seed, right, in the play-ins. And 1-5. Same with AHQ. AHQ doing really badly. What happened to LMS? They just not grown with the times, or what's happened?
Yeah. I think. Yeah, I think they had a little bit of the same problem as TSM in the sense that they had a lot of losing lanes. If you look at their drafts, both their losses against World Elite, they had two. They always had they always had like two or three losing lanes. If you actually look at their drafts, the, both their losses were 27 minutes, and one was 27, one was 32 minutes against World Elite, and both of them they had two or three losing lanes. And I feel like a team like Flash Wolves, when you're going up teams like World Elite, these really strong individual teams, you can't afford to draft like that. In terms of, I think it's really bad to say, but you have to start playing your own game and have picks that create pressure, but um, and yes, maybe give up a little bit of scaling for the sake of doing something a little different. And I respect that they tried to pull out the Vladimir against one of the games against World Elite, but I just don't think that matchup against the Galio really does anything. And it's just too slow in terms of its power spikes. Um, and even though they're a great team individually, like Maple, and they're great players. I think they needed to do a little more in terms of bring something different to the table. Like their composition against World Elites, like Shen, Jarvan, Ori, Xayah Lulu. Like it just like the Xayah Lulu is going to lose 2v2 to the Kate Jana. Corki's going to get pressure on Oriana. Cho is going to get pressure on Shen. It's just like they've got pretty much nearly like two or three losing lanes, and kind of dug themselves a hole in draft. So although Flash Wolves have a decent understanding of macro, I think that again it's a similar thing to TSM in the sense that they just set themselves up for a rough time by drafting losing lanes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I definitely. I mean, sometimes though they were building these massive leads even with scaling players, and then they just didn't really seem to be able to close out the game. So yeah, definitely very very strong players like especially like Maple Casa, right? Always
Yeah.
been, at times people questioning whether or not they could be the best mid jungle in the world, right? But they just can't seem to close those games out either. And I mean, it's been what 3 years and they still haven't fixed that. So maybe we just continue to see LMS, I guess, keep declining unless, like you said, they make some changes to the way that they play the game, or maybe even to the rosters.
Mm. Yeah, considering their world's experience, like I thought that they would perform better. I honestly like coming into it, I thought that they would beat World Elite. Like I thought they would beat World Elite and probably even Misfits, and Misfits as well. Like I thought the two teams that were going to be going out were going to be TSM and Flash Wolves, but considering like Flash Wolves' experience on the international stage and their players are really good, so I was definitely disappointed by their performance.
Yeah, I mean, Misfits a big surprise, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I thought they were going to go 1-5 or 0-6, to be honest. Like, just based on the regional strength. I mean, especially after Rift Rivals, NA just
yeah.
dumpster the year.
I think yeah. I was under the assumption that NA were a lot stronger than EU coming into Worlds, based off of just in general, just looking at the games. Like if you actually just watch the EU games versus the NA games were a lot more like the finals were a lot more cleaner, and the way the games were played out. The games were a lot more cleaner than EU, and I was just thinking that NA was just going to stomp EU, but got told otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much all the analysts around the world thought that as well. I mean, even just the quality of play in the ELCS.
Hmm.
If you watch a top NA team versus a bottom NA team, it's still like a relatively, close matchup. Teams swinging games. Bottom tier EU is just hot garbage to watch. The quality of practice
Yeah,
in NA.
pretty much.
All right, well, I guess we can move on to the quarterfinals and do some predictions. So the first quarterfinal, which I was actually a little bit confused by this because the way in which they like presented the graphic on stream, they had like RNG first, but the first quarterfinal according to the website is Longzhu versus Samsung. So I mean, this is the quarterfinal to watch, right? In my opinion, I think this is going to be it's the two Korean giants, world's finalists last year, Longzhu, LCK Summer Champions. Uh, this is going to be a big quarterfinal to watch. So who's winning, Shop?
I just based off of Longzhu's performance compared to Samsung's in the group stages, I have to go with Longzhu. I think it's going to be like 3-1, 3-1 or 3-0. To be honest, I think that BDD and Crown they have very similar. They're very very similar champ pools. Like if you actually look at the games, their champ pools, they're both like Rise and Talia players and um, Syndra as well. So I think that it's going to be a really good matchup mix. I think Crown and BDD are two insanely good mid laners. But in saying that, actually thinking about how close they are in the mid lane, and especially in the 2v2 mid, I think that this will be a 3-1. It won't be a 3-0, it'll be a 3-1. I think Crown can definitely pop off one of these games. Uh, I do think that Khan is definitely superior to QV. Definitely more of a carry threat. But I wouldn't be surprised if Samsung came out with some sort of strategy to kind of ban out Khan away from his carry champions and make it like a tank v tank. Um, and then kind of, uh, yeah, like trying to figure out some sort of a way to get Khan on the back foot because he hasn't really played any tanks. He's literally like played Jarvan. He's played like Jarvan and Jace, and he hasn't really played any Malco. Has he played any Malco? Let's see.
Um,
Let's see.
I
Longzhu. So Khan, so he hasn't. He's played 3 games at Jarvan, 1 game at Jace, 1 game at Nasus.
he's been building that job in quite
it,
aggressively as
it,
well, if I
it's
remember.
it's aggressively, yeah. So like
Yeah.
like it'll be really interesting to see what Samsung can do. My prediction is that they're going to put a lot of bans on Khan, get him on the back foot, and then like isolate bot lane, and then figure out a way to kind of through ambition maybe, getting some sort of cheesy bot lane 2v2 matchup. And my prediction is that people will start coming up with ways to counter the Ardent. Like maybe I don't know, you might see like Blitzcranks being more played more, something like that. Something to do with like I think that people are sick of like the Ardents. I think we'll see something like maybe either Gorilla or Core JJ pick up something like a Blitzcrank, um,
Right.
and start punishing these Lulu picks and Jana picks.
Right. Um, I guess I would have to agree with you on Longzhu most likely winning this 3-0 or 3-1. I'm gonna frame it, I guess perhaps for a different reason. Khan, Cuvée, everything that you've said has been pretty relevant. But for me, it's the difference between Prey and Ruler. If the meta does stay the same with this big bot focus.
Mm.
Like you mentioned, where Caitlyn coming up from the Chinese teams, and I mean the way that they're playing Caitlyn is just everything around
Yeah.
that champion. And Ruler is just not that. Like he's a decent AD carry, but he's not Prey. Prey can play. He can play the Juggernaut, or I guess the Jugger Caitlyn. If that becomes a thing, he can play. Be the focal point of his team and put out all of the damage. But Ruler's just he's kind of a secondary player to Crown and Kuve, right?
Yeah, I can see that. I definitely can see that. I think Prey Gorilla obviously been renowned as one of the most veteran bot lanes. So yeah, I do agree. I think that with Caitlyn coming back in the meta, Caitlyn will be high priority, and Prey has been renowned as an excellent Caitlyn player. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Longzhu winning out games through bot lane as well as top lane.
Right. I do have one other question for you. I think we saw one game of it in group stage, but is Haru gonna be played, or are we gonna see every game of Ambition? Is there any point in bringing out Haru, or
Um, I don't. I think that they should kind of stick to what they know and stick with ambition. To be honest, I think he's been playing quite well. So I think it would be a little bit silly to bring in Haru. I don't think he's had the best performances. The one
right?
game he played, how did he go on the one game he played?
I think it was the game against RNG game against Samsung, right?
We got Samsung. Where is it? We
Um,
got Samsung Galaxy. So Haru played one Ezreal game. He played against. Oh, they won. But they played him against Fenerbahce. So that I think that is quite. That just shows how they don't really want to play him. They played him one game against Fenerbahce, and the game went to 48 minutes.
all right, yes, no,
So
sorry, I thought they lost the game, but it was
nah, they nearly
a
lost.
a mental loss, right?
So that maybe that's quite indicative of why they wouldn't play Haru. The one game they do play him, they nearly lost to Fenerbahce. So um, yeah, I don't think we'll see him being played.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, I definitely agree. But I mean, this is, for anybody who is trying to decide which quarterfinal matchup to watch, if you can't watch all of them, make sure you watch this one. This is the quarterfinal to watch, in my opinion. Um.
I actually, I actually, I actually differ. I think this will be a great quarterfinal, but personally, I'm really interested for the World Elite C9.
Oh, really? Well, I guess when we get down to that one, you can tell me. That'll be my first question. I'll ask you why. All right. Quarterfinal number two, SKT versus Misfits. Now, in my opinion, this is the least interesting one to watch, unless Misfits wins or manages to do something. But I mean, I just look at like the players on the list. The strength of the players historically. Um, you got like Hans Sama versus Bang. Um, it just the saying the names out loud. You just see one team is just incredibly outclassing the other one, right? Like for me, this is straight 3-0. Would you agree?
I don't think there's much to say here. I think everyone kind of knows this is going to be a pretty one-sided affair. I don't really see. I don't see Misfits being able to stack up individually, and although Misfits are a well-rounded team, they can both play through top and through bot. I don't see how they're going to have the opportunity unless they massively outdraft. But it's kind of up to SKT to lose rather than Misfits to win, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So unless SKT really screw up in draft and in game, it's not really going to. I don't think we're going to see anything less than a 3-0.
Right. So I mean, if Misfits does win a game, it's because SKT really fucks up. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um.
yeah,
Okay.
agreed.
All right. Well, I mean, I don't really have anything else to say on that quarterfinal. Same for you. I mean, it's like
Yeah,
a 1.5 minute discussion. Um.
yeah.
Okay. RNG versus Fnatic. Now, I guess, both kind of have an agreement that if a Korean team is going to be taken down, that RNG is going to be the team to do it. Um, so I guess the strength of RNG, does that like translate against the non-Korean teams as well? Are they going to 3-0 Fnatic?
Yeah, well, obviously, yeah, Reckless is a great AD carry, but I think the one thing that lets down Fnatic is that the matchup between like So if you just look at the AD carries, like Reckless versus Uzi, yes, Uzi is better. Reckless can compete, I guess, but it's more the duo. I think Uzi Ming compared to like Reckless Jesus is just a massive mismatch. Like Jesus compared to Ming, I don't think Jesus is that great of a support. Like yeah, they work well, like they work okay, but not to the caliber of Uzi Ming. And I think that the games are going to be, is it like especially in this meta, um, unless Caps can play something that's going to impact the bot lane, maybe like if he somehow pulls out like an Aurelion Soul and manages to get a few like he used to do, and impacts bot lane to make it, or Broxah plays through bot lane, and somehow wins like a 3v2 or 3v3 skirmish bot. I don't really see it Fnatic winning because top's just going to be tank v tank. Like I don't think Soaz is going to branch out too much. He might pull out a Nah, maybe he might pull out a Rumble, maybe, but I think it generally is going to be like Maokai Cho'Gath or that type of stuff, or Galio top or whatever. And I think in terms of, I'm just looking at the roster, and I don't really see how Fnatic are going to have a win condition. The only thing I'm thinking, yeah, is through Caps being able to impact the bot 2v2 and make it possibly a 3v2 and get Uzi behind and reckless snowballing or something like a Twitch. Um, but other than that, yeah, I think this is going to be a 3-0 in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, I mean the um the the Reckless being the strongest point in your team, and then he's going up against Uzi. It's I guess
The
a
worry.
very yeah it's a very unfortunate matchup for them to end up in. So I definitely have to agree, and yeah I don't think they're going to pick up the game. Like I mean Jazzis and Reckless, yeah, you are right. They work well together, but it's not really in the laning phase, right? They kind of just when they were doing well in a year, particularly when they were doing a lot of cheese, like with the I mean I suppose if you call it cheese, like with the cannon whatnot. They
Yeah.
were they were kind of just walking around the map together and doing some crazy things.
And it was
Um,
generally like Broxah playing like Elise and like gank, or Elise in and like and then getting a gank off bot, and they would just snowball through that. It wasn't generally in the 2v2 that they did well. It was like Caps or Broxah impacting the bot. So I think that's something that if Broxah isn't able to impact bot or Caps isn't able to impact bot, and and it gets to like it stays in the 2v2, or if you let Uzi get something like a Caitlyn, I just feel like Fnatic aren't gonna have they're not gonna be able to deal with something like that.
right. I guess the one question which I do have for you about RNG, I guess potentially looking at the floor is their jungler has been playing, he played like a lot of Lee Sin and Rek'Sai, especially when Jarvan was down in the group stages. Do you think that that champion pool could be a bit of a worry? Or that the jungle position could be a bit of a worry? Maybe not against Fnatic, but against some of the teams which they could place further on in the tournament.
I don't actually know too much about MLXG as a player. Like I know he played four different champions. He played Sedge, Rek'Sai, Jarvan, Lee, in this competition. I think that I'm not too sure about how deep his champion pool because I didn't watch them too much in the LPL. Um, but like four champions in terms of like I wouldn't be surprised like something like jungle, right? Like if you do have a jungler that can only play something like three or four junglers, it's not the end of the world because no teams want to put too many bans on a jungler, especially when you're on RNG. You don't really want to be targeting a jungler because the difference between someone playing like a Rek'Sai versus like a Jarvan isn't the difference between win or losing. But the difference between someone getting a Lulu versus I don't know, like a Lulu versus a Tarek or a Lulu versus a Karma is massive. So it's the difference between like I don't think that Fnatic can afford to put too many bans on MLXG. I think across the board you should be looking on putting bans on either Uzi, Ming, or Xiaohu. Uh, so like yes, like he may have a small champion pool. We might be wrong, but even if he does, I don't think it's going to be a worry in terms of drafting.
Right. You just mentioned Lulu again, and so this is something which I was meant to ask you earlier. But you think Lulu is the strongest support at the moment in the tournament, but then we've been seeing like a lot of I guess Caitlyn Jana doing really
Mm,
really well into this. I think even you guys in the play-ins played
yeah.
Caitlyn to Lulu. Is that like a counter pick which you have to ban out or
So I think Lulu as a champion does well in certain matchups, but Lulu, So Lulu really struggles against champs like like Kate Jana or uh like like long range pokey stuff. But in bot matchups where it's like too short range, Lulu kind of excels like um Lulu Twitch or Lulu Tristana or something like that. If and they're versing something like not Caitlyn, anything but Caitlyn, Lulu I think Lulu just kind of outscales. Even though you can only give Ardent to one person, when you have something like a hyperhero like Tristana or Twitch, the amount of attack speed that you get is just absolutely ridiculous between like your W and the Ardent Sensor. Compared to something like Janna, I think is better in lane. Like Janna's definitely better in lane than Lulu. And is really good if you have like more of a if you're playing around bot and you want to break towers. Or if you have multiple champions that can utilize the Ardent, like if you say maybe you had like a Corki mid or like a Graves jungle, I feel like Janna can sometimes be beneficial. Um, or even like Jace mid. So I think it really kind of depends on like the sort of comps you're going. And I think if you're looking to have more of the lane pressure or you're looking to be more scaling, and I think this is actually quite interesting, is that Ming or from RNG they prioritize Janna over Lulu. So this must mean that they do prioritize like the lane pressure, which is quite interesting. Which actually makes sense because in this competition it seems like the bot lane that has the most bot pressure and can push their advantage to bot like will generally win the game. So um, like maybe like Lulu might not be as strong as I think, but yeah, it really does come down to the style of the team that you're playing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, definitely does seem to be that way. Like if the Lulu doesn't get absolutely crushed in lane, then it's pretty much over for the other team. But
Yeah,
I guess I guess maybe John is just the best champion to do that with, right? At the moment.
yeah,
Um, okay, and I suppose like Janna as well doesn't fall behind. Like you can play like Blitzcrank or something, and do really well in that early game. But Janna still built Ardent, and she's still an incredibly good team fighter as well. Into the
yeah.
Lulu. Okay, so the final quarterfinal matchup, WE versus C9, the final hope of NA. Does the final hope of NA have any hopes to win this game? What's the
Um,
score?
all right, so I'm actually gonna go out on a limb and say C9 are gonna win 3-2. I think very highly of C9. I think like they're extremely well-rounded team. There's carry potential from every role. I think maybe the only thing is like Sneaky has been renowned. They haven't had the best. They Sneaky Smoothie don't have the best laning phase. If they can, kind of smooth that over for this series, then I think there's definitely potential here for a win for C9. I think Contracts um, is a mixed bag. He could play anything from Kane to Sejuani to Gragas and Jarvan and Ezreal. He can play anything, and Jensen as well. I think Jensen's extremely talented. So I think this is a set where it's going to come down to draft. I think this is a coach versus coach. This is a coach versus coach series, in my opinion. Like it really is going to come down to. I think who's the coach? World Elite is it Home? Home?
Uh, yeah, like Hom.
Yeah. So
Versus
he's
Reaper.
an ex LCK player. Yeah, he's an ex LCK player. And so is Reapid. So Reapid versus Home. I don't know how to say his name, but yeah, I think it honestly will come down to draft phase. And whoever can adapt better in the series is going to be really important. So I think we'll be looking for. I think you'll see one thing. Between game one in game three, the drafts will be significantly different because people like this is one thing that I've learned in competitive play in a best of five. So there's generally in League of Legends there's like a meta, and then within a best of five there's like a mini meta. It's a meta within itself. So between two teams, there's certain things that teams prioritize, and then as the games go on, the meta changes extremely fast because you figure out what's working and what's not working. So I'm really interested to see how the mini meta, like the meta within this series, kind of evolves from game one to say game three and potentially game five. I think you'll see if you actually look at the drafts from game one to like the end, the drafts will be like significantly different. I think that's just my opinion. I think that you'll see a lot of different stuff coming out. And I'm hoping C9 pull out the win, but it'll be a close one.
Right. I guess in terms of that draft thing which you pointed out, what's the role which it's gonna be hitting? You know, is it gonna be looking to get impact on something really really strong to potentially punish top, or is it gonna be around that ADC or mid role?
Hmm. It's hard to say. Like I think that bot bot will kind of remain the same in terms of I don't see either. I think bot will kind of be like the standard, the same picks like Cold, Kate, Trist, whatever. But I think we might see some interesting picks out of Contracts and Jensen, and I'm hoping that Contracts. It's going to be like a large 2v2 mid game, like Condigier versus Contracts Jensen. I think there's going to be a lot of action through mid. And I think this game's going to be won or lost through mid, to be honest. Like whether or not it's pretty much largely, in my opinion, Contracts versus Condi and how they can utilize. Like if one of these players gets ahead, Jensen or Gia, it's going to be really really hard for the other to come back because both of these are so good at pushing their advantages and they're so um, the way they use their pressure is so overbearing. Like it really is difficult to deal with, especially dealing firsthand with someone like Jensen. Um, so I think that you might see interesting picks out of Contracts, possibly like Cade and Ezreal, that type of stuff. And Jensen, like he always has his pocket picks. Like he has his pocket picks like Echo and stuff like that. He's always been renowned as Echo player. So if Gia picks up something like a Syndra, I wouldn't be surprised if Jensen pulls out something interesting like an Echo. So we'll have to see what goes on there. But yeah, it'll be won or lost through mid.
All right. Well, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to disagree. I think World Elite did better in I guess the group stage. You know, they took down TSM, right? And I think I think TSM obviously was the better the better NA team out of C9 and TSM, right? And I think that the only area where C9 has an advantage is in that top lane. So I gotta say it's gonna be a 3-0 to World Elite, maybe a 3-1 possibly. C9 picking up a win. I think C9's quite predictable as well. I think that they just consistently playing around the mid lane, and I just don't think that Condi and Shea, like especially Shea is such a good player. I just don't think that they're going to have any of the hard camp mid, and I just don't think it's going to get off for Contracts and Jensen. Um, so I have to give this one quite strongly to World Elite, but I can see why this was your matchup for the week then if you think it's going to be a 3-2. Um,
I think like one thing to note actually. So I did a lot of analysis on and my analyst did on C9, and they evolved rapidly from their games in NA across their journey in the Korean boot camp and like what they are now. Like I've never seen, and Jack, my analyst, I've never seen like a team evolve so rapidly between the finals or the gauntlet, whatever they played in, compared to the Korean boot camp and how much they evolved there, and then going into Worlds. They've changed completely. Like they really did transform as a team. So I think like a lot of people who are basing this might be like a stomp because they didn't like WE beat TSM and C9 aren't as good as TSM. Like I think that point's like a bit invalid, but we'll have to see. Like we'll see what happens. Obviously, there is stuff. Obviously there's merit behind it, but I do think that C9 evolved rapidly between NALCS and Worlds.
Right. Okay. Well, I guess we'll get to find out on I think that one's Sunday night, right?
Yeah, it's the last one.
In yeah, in Australia. Um, all right. So the final question which I have for you regarding Worlds, outside of a few questions about Direwolves time, who's winning? Um, and why is it SKT? Nah. Who's winning?
I'm gonna say Longzhu. I think again they're playing extremely well, and uh, I'm interested. I think actually you'll know who's gonna win Worlds after the Longzhu versus Samsung. Like if Longzhu dominates Samsung, then I think 100% Longzhu are gonna win. But if Longzhu struggle against Samsung, I think that SKT then yeah. So at the moment I can't tell, but I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say Longzhu.
Right. Okay. I mean, My heart is telling me SKT, as a fan, but I think my brain's telling me Longzhu. Like, Prey and Gorilla have just been so strong. And I guess particularly on that top side of the map as well, Khan versus Huni. And I guess the failings which SKT are having in the jungle, like Peanut, not really looking very good. And I mean, Blank is still Blank. He's still decent, but so yeah, I have to think that it's gonna go over to Longzhu. But I really hope that it's SKT, and SKT definitely has a very strong chance of winning it. Um, yeah, I think this is definitely the worst iteration of SKT we've seen since season four. Uh, Huni and Peanut, it's not really seeming to do so well, particularly during the summer split. Um,
Yeah.
all right, so I have a few questions for you about our next topic, which is the dial. Oh, actually, you don't have anything else to say on the knockout stage of Worlds, do you?
Nah, it's all good.
All right. So a few questions for you about Dire Wars in the knockout stage. So I guess first of all, how was your overall experience at Worlds? Did you enjoy going to China? Perhaps not so much, not just the gaming side of things, but also visiting the place.
Yeah. So yeah, we spent a bit of time in a Korean boot camp in Korea. Had a few scrims there. Um, with teams like Fnatic and like a Korean Challenger Series team and um, what's the other Hong Kong Attitude, like a bunch of teams. Like the scrims were going pretty good. Um, were decent. And China though, Riot treated us really well. The hotel was absolutely amazing. The way they like food and the rooms were just it's just surreal, to be honest. Like the way they treat you over there is just crazy. So props to Riot for that. But um, the weather was extremely like disgusting. Like it was just hot, really hot and really humid. It was like really humid and really hot. Just gross. So we kind of like stayed inside like majority of the time. And there wasn't really much around where we were. We're kind of like in like a newly developed area. Um, but in terms of scrims, we did well in scrims in Korea, and then when we came to China, our the meta seemed to shift, and we started versing a lot more tank oriented, like frontline oriented team comps, and we didn't really adapt. We didn't really think like it was too late to kind of adapt, and we didn't have the best read on the meta, and we kind of struggled in scrims in Korea, in China. We scrimmed like Fenerbahce, Fnatic, Hong Kong Attitude. Um, Scrimmed a bunch of teams, like a bunch of teams, and they weren't disastrous, but they weren't like the best.
Right.
In terms like we learnt a lot, but we were kind of like panicking because it was like a few days before playing, and we're trying to figure out what the meta was, and we're trying to figure out what band-aids can we use to like patch up our weaknesses, and how are we gonna utilize our strengths, blah blah. So yeah, but overall, like the world's experience was invaluable. Like in terms of how much we learned as a team and as an organization about how to approach further international tournaments and what in terms of like what we need to do to close the gap between like Oceania and other regions. Like in terms of all that stuff, I think I've learned a hell of a lot.
Right. But yeah, that's really good. Hopefully in future we'll be able to see Hoshiani making it. I guess to the main event part of the tournaments.
Yeah.
So I guess in terms of that point, what did you think of DW's I guess group draw? Obviously, a lot of people thought it was quite a rough one in terms of Cloud9, and getting the Brazilian team as well. Um, did you expect it to make it out of the group stage? Maybe in first, maybe in second.
I thought we would beat the Brazilian team. Like I think we're better. I still think we're better than the Brazilian team. I was happy when we got the Brazilian team. I think they're quite a I don't know. I think they're an average team, but like the first game kind of demonstrated that. But then we tilted. Like it's gonna sound like an excuse, but like it's not an excuse. Like we played really shit. We played poorly, but I don't think we played to our level. And I think we got complacent because we were extremely cocky heading into our game versus Team One in the second day. And after our like that loss against C9 on day two, where it was really close. And everyone was they was so the guys were so cut. They were so disappointed because like they felt that win in the palm of their hands. We just made a few key errors and they just slipped away. I don't think we recovered well and we felt cocky, so we like tried to pull out like stuff like the Fiora and it just didn't seem to work. When all we had to do was if we had like a Cho'Gath that game, we would have won 100%. So
Right.
it's a little bit disappointing. So um, but a lot of lessons learned.
Right. Um, okay. I guess final question which I really have for you about this is kind of not so much about DW. You know, DW is the latest you know, Oceanic team to make it out. But you know, Oceania's never really made it out of the wildcard tournaments, or to a to a main event through the play-ins. Um, is Oceania just unlucky, or are we lacking talent as a region? You know, why are we not making it to these main events?
Uh, this is like it's a big question, but I'll just go through a few key points. But um, I don't think it's talent. I think we have a lot of talent in Oceania. I think we have the talent to compete on the world stage, and especially against other wildcard regions. Like I think we individually we can hold our own. I think, well, considering this is our first year with gaming houses, I think we did a pretty good effort. We had a pretty good run. I don't think many people even think about that. Like it's the first year Oceania's had gaming houses, like all 8 teams. So I think that's a massive thing to note. But our macro is not there. And this is obviously because we get no validation in terms of what we're playing compared to other regions. So we can get away with stuff that is suboptimal, which is like a massive contributing factor as to why our games may look scrappy is because we play things and we think that they work really well and like why wouldn't we play this if it's working really well? But in reality, it's not how the game's like meant to be played. But the main things that we lack in Oceania is that the intensity of our practice isn't there. Um, I think a lot of people this year were coming in with more of like, oh, this is like really cool. This is a gaming house. Like I want to win, but I don't want it like that badly. Like I don't know. I don't know whether it was a form of lack of motivation or kind of like excitement that they're in a gaming house or the low expectations they have of themselves. But the intensity of the practice in our region is extremely low in terms of scrims. So I think that one thing that we can do as a region, and I think that I'll be talking to a lot of other coaches about, is that we need to find out ways to replicate the quality of OPL within scrims. I think there's a few ways you can do this, but just replicate that intensity because what's happened in scrims is that the games are just they're not indicative whatsoever of how the games that get played out on stage and they're not indicative of what we when we go to an international event like the games if you actually watch the C9 versus us the game 2 the games never get to that point where it's like kind of like a seesaw like you're going for 4-1 to 4-1 to 4-1 to 1-4 and like figure and then looking for an opening. The games never go like that. They're always like, all right, let's just like someone always overextends and we get a free pick, and then we just like get a tower or someone just gets a random solo kill and then we just get like Baron. Like we never make we never get like advantages um through actual micro macro maneuver, and that's because the intensity of the practice doesn't replicate um, OPL, and we never get practice in those sort of games or this slow paced macro game. So I think that one thing as a region we can do is just trying to make our scrims a lot better in terms of practice, so we can practice and replicate OPL.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely agree that I was coaching Abyss again at the end of this split, which is the main reason why none of the shows are being done towards the end of the split. And the scrims are they're very much the reasons why teams win scrims are nothing to do with the reasons why they win OPL. You know, it's just like you just see like a bot
Mm.
lane go 0-10 in 10 minutes, and you know, sure you get duo kills in OPL, but you never see like almost intentional
Yeah.
feeding in OPL or just the high levels of aggression, and then they get to the OPL stage and they're like quite careful, and yeah, it is very
Yep.
much a lack of discipline. Well, maybe not discipline's the right word, but a lack of yeah, a lack of self motivation. Like they want to win, but they don't want to do they don't want to do the steps in order to win. They're just like, oh, winning would be
Yeah,
nice, but they don't think,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Know what you mean.
yeah. So yeah, hopefully, you can talk to other coaches, make a bit of a change in that, and hopefully we'll see Direwolves or Oceania as a whole doing really well on the world stage next year. So I just want to say a massive thank you again, Sharp, for coming onto the show. And if anybody is watching, as usual, don't forget to like and subscribe to the video. Oh, and the competition. Do the competition. You can get $20 free um, on Steam. All right. Thanks again. Oh, do you have any closing remarks or anything you want to say?
No, just thanks for having me on the show, and yeah.
Awesome.